They handed me a new badge with my name spelled right and my access spelled wrong. My screen lit, but every folder I needed asked for permission I no longer had. No meeting was canceled, yet my calendar turned quiet. That is how people like me are cut off. Not with a goodbye, but with a soft click that makes your work go dim. I did not argue. I thanked the young manager who could not hold my eye. I walked past a wall of photos where my hair was darker and my hands were stained with ink. For 22 years, I carried this place the way a mother carries a sleeping child. Careful, steady. Now someone else had my keys, and they smiled like it was kindness. If you are watching, you may know this feeling. The work is yours in every line, but the door will not open for you. People who used to ask for help walk faster when they see you. Your chair is warm, but your voice is cold. The part they forgot is quiet, paperwork. Years ago, when we were small, I wrote our process into a simple document. It was how we built ideas from scratch, how we tested, named, fixed mistakes, promised quality. It was not a patent or a flashy pitch. It was a method that turned chaos into results until clients trusted us. We called it the Seed to Scale framework, and I kept the authorship because no one else wanted the duty. Back then, ownership felt like romance. We said, what is mine is ours. We did not think about what happens when love turns into a line item. So I kept authorship quietly, like a spare key under a brick. We used the framework on every project. It became the way the company moved, the way the team talked, the way clients learned to expect wins. People forgot where it came from. I did not. On the day they cut me off, a new strategic plan went live in the shared drive. Only I could not open it. A junior analyst sent a screenshot by mistake. My name was still on the method, but in small print. The plan said our big reveal was Friday. They would tell the world about our $1 million concept. I felt my face warm with memory. I remembered the first time the method saved a failing deal. Back then, the number was small. The promise was clear. I went home early and opened a box of old files. I do not keep many trophies. I keep receipts. I found the original document, the one we signed when no one outside cared who we were. It said, in plain language, that I owned the method and granted the company a right to use it while I was an officer in good standing. Officer in good standing. Such boring words. Such sharp teeth. I looked at the badge in my purse and laughed. They had changed my role in the system. They had changed my voice in meetings. They left the title on my email because it looked polite, but the access told the truth. They had moved me out of good standing. By dimming me, they touched the wire that ran back to my authorship. I did not call a lawyer. Not yet. I brewed tea and read the document 3 times. The clause was plain. If my standing changed without a written agreement, the company's right to the method paused. Not ended. Paused. Use required my consent until things were made right. Friday was not far. They would go on stage with my method written into every promise. They would talk about speed, savings, certainty. I knew their words before they spoke them. The concept, once humble, now carried 7 figures of hope. People started to call it the $1 million concept. At my gate, my phone buzzed. A message from a young engineer. They pushed your section out of the deck. Names got moved. Please be careful. I thanked her. I did not ask for more. The truth was already in my drawer. I sat and drafted a short letter. 2 paragraphs. I noted the clause and the change in my standing. I stated that any public use of the Seed to Scale framework would require my written consent until our status was corrected. I attached the signed document and the date stamps. I sent it to the CEO, the head of operations, and the board secretary. I blind copied myself and printed a copy for my file. Silence. Hours passed. Meetings booked without me came and went. When the reply arrived, it wore a smile. We appreciate your passion. Let's discuss after the launch. I looked at a neighbor watering her roses and felt that steady click in my chest that means a decision is made. I wrote the timeline. Access change Tuesday. My letter Wednesday. Launch Friday. I called an old mentor, a woman who taught me to tie my hair back when the wind got wild. I read her the clause. She listened, then said, "If they go forward after your notice, they are not walking into a surprise. They are walking into a mirror." Evening fell. I set my alarm early for Friday. I laid out a dark dress and comfortable shoes. I packed a folder with the document, my letter, and a short statement. I was not going to make a scene. I was going to keep the truth within reach. The next morning, I slipped the badge into a drawer with old pens and spare keys. Across town, lights warmed on a stage. Scripts were rehearsed. And in the middle of the deck, the $1,000,000 concept sat like a crown on a borrowed head. I stepped out under a thin line of sun and walked toward the moment where rumors end and documents speak, headed for the room where they planned to sell my method as theirs, while my consent sat, unsigned, in my bag. I reached the venue early and found a quiet bench in the lobby, away from banners that used my words without my name. The carpet smelled like glue. A line of lanyards waited in neat rows, each one a small permission. I carried none. Before sitting, I sent my letter again, this time to legal a company, events a company, and the CEO's personal inbox. No drama, no threat. Just the same notice with the same attachments. The signed authorship agreement, the clause about officer in good standing, and a clear line. Until our status is corrected in writing, you do not have my consent to present, publish, or profit from the seed-to-scale framework in any public forum. Then I called Nora. Nora keeps receipts for the receipts. We met when I was 30 and certain she was 50 and careful. I read the clause to her again. She asked for a photo. I sent it. It's clear, she said. What did they change in writing? Nothing, I said. They dimmed my access. They moved my approvals. They removed my section from the deck. Did they send you a written change in status? No. Then your consent is required, she said. You gave notice. If they go on stage with your method now, it is not a mistake. It is a choice. How fast should I act if they do? Slow and exact, she said. Timestamp everything. Let them leave footprints in wet concrete. Don't shout. Hold the mirror, I breathed out. My hand steadied. I opened a notes app and made a timeline for what I expected. Rehearsal, doors, keynote, product segment, methodology slide, claim of ownership, promises to clients, the number tied to the concept. I left space for the moment when someone would say something true without meaning to. An intern rolled a cart of coffee past me. She smiled. I asked where public seating was. She pointed to a balcony. I thanked her and took the stairs. From the rail, I could see investors in the front rows and the stage manager tapping his headset. He nodded toward a man I once trained to collect client feedback. He now carried the title that used to live under my name. The playlist ended. Lights dimmed. The CEO walked out with the gait of a person who thinks risk dissolves in applause. He spoke of speed and scale. He raised his hand and a slide appeared with the diagram I drew on a napkin 11 winters ago. The lines were thicker. The colors were brighter. The bones were the same. My phone buzzed. Nora, recording? Yes, I typed. Time stamped. The head of operations joined and praised the team that made this happen. They named 3 directors. They did not name me. The crowd clapped. I clicked a stopwatch and watched seconds pass. The CEO turned to the slide titled, Our $1,000,000 Concept. He laughed softly and said, We call this seed to scale. I wrote the time and wrote the words exactly. Then the microphone caught something it was not meant to catch. The stage manager, whispering to an assistant, asked, Did legal reply to the lady's letter? The assistant said, They'll address it after the show. I added the whisper to my notes because microphones are honest and rooms have ears. A client joined to share results. He praised the method without knowing the war under it. He mentioned the figure that made the room lean forward. 7 digits saved in a single quarter. The audience brightened. Cameras glowed. People photographed the slide where my napkin had become a flagship. My phone buzzed again. It was Mia, the junior analyst who had slipped me the screenshot. They're saying you drafted the early version as internal training, she wrote. They say you were paid salary, so it's ours. I answered, Authorship agreement is signed. Clause applies. Keep your head down. Nora texted, If they release a downloadable or send a deck with your method inside, save it. Public distribution matters. The CEO promised the method would be part of every client package by summer. He announced a training calendar and quoted lines I wrote to guide young teams through their first messy pilots. People nodded like church. I thought of nights with sticky notes and blank whiteboards, building a road that did not exist yet. I thought of the morning my daughter, 8 then, traced my diagram and said, "It looks like a garden." That was when I named it Seed to Scale. The day felt small then. Today it did not. The keynote turned toward product features. My phone lit, an email from legal company at 10:42 a.m. "Thank you for your note. We are confident in our ownership position. We will schedule a meeting early next week. Best Legal." I read it twice. Confident is a warm word until it is cold. I forwarded the email to myself and to Nora. I added it to the timeline. After notice, they proceeded. They acknowledged receipt. They declined to pause. The CEO smiled again. "We will release the full playbook to partners at noon." I stood. I smoothed my dress. I walked down the stairs, steady, toward the side door where the stage manager waited with a clipboard and a problem he did not yet understand. Outside the door, a small table held badges. Speaker, staff, guest. I took none. I took out my letter instead. He looked up. I said my name. He searched my face, remembered, and let his eyes drop to the paper. He read the first line and paled the way people do when they realize the floor they stand on belongs to someone else. "Where is your legal counsel?" I asked softly. "In the green room," he said. "Good," I said, and stepped through the door toward the room where promises burn hottest, where the full playbook waited on a laptop named Final. I pushed the handle and felt the latch give, and stepped in. The green room was cooler than the stage, the air conditioned to keep sweat from shining on faces that sold certainty. A long table held bottles of water with labels turned outward. A laptop sat in the center with a sticker that read, "Final," as if a word could make a promise safe. I stood in the doorway and let the room see me before I spoke. "Legal?" I said, not loud. A man in a navy suit looked up from his phone. He had the careful smile of someone trained to speak after checking for exits. I handed him my letter, the same 2 paragraphs I had already sent. He read the first line and lifted his eyes, then read the rest and looked for a chair. "We received this," he said. "We disagree with your position." "I know you disagree," I said. "I am not here for debate. I am here for clarity. You have notice. Whatever you do now is not accident. It is decision." He set the paper on the table and folded his hands. "We believe your framework was created within the scope of your employment. It was authored under a separate agreement," I said, "signed by the founders. It grants you use while I am an officer in good standing. You altered my standing without a written change. That pauses your right. You have my notice, time-stamped, before launch." He swallowed and looked past me, toward the door where muffled applause swelled and softened. He wanted to make this small. I did not help him. "I'm asking for one action," I said. "Do not present or distribute the method today. Correct my status in writing first, or ask for my consent. Simple." He glanced at the laptop. I followed his eyes. A window glowed. Partner Packet V12, Seed to Scale Playbook. Next to it, a countdown timer marked Auto Release 12. It was 10:53. The room hummed like a hive that thought honey was guaranteed. "Who scheduled that?" I asked. "Events," he said. "It emails partners the link after the keynote." "Then you have an hour and 7 minutes to behave," I said. "Turn it off." He didn't move. The stage manager slipped in, headset crooked. "We're on methodology. In 8 minutes," he said, and stopped when he saw my letter on the table. His voice lowered. "Do we pause?" Legal kept his eyes on me. "We proceed," he said, but the words had lost their shoes. I took out my phone and opened the camera. I photographed the laptop screen and the timer. I photographed the open folder, the file names, the version number, the task labeled auto release. I did not touch a key. I recorded the time. I emailed the photos to myself, to Nora, and to a private archive I use when storms gather. I wrote a line in my notes. Notice repeated in person at 10:54. Auto release visible. The stage manager rubbed his temple. "If we cut methodology, the whole story collapses," he said. "That is not my problem," I said gently. "My problem is authorship and consent. Yours is schedule." He left to whisper into a microphone that ran to 3 rooms and 100 decisions. Legal stayed. He was used to people either shouting or shrinking. My quiet was not familiar to him. He cleared his throat. "What do you want?" he asked. "My name where it belongs," I said. "Control of how my method is used. A written correction of my status. And today, no public use without consent." He tapped the paper with a finger. "We can review after the event." "That is not the time," I said. "After the event, footprints dry." He checked his phone and typed. His jaw set in the shape of a person who wants to appear calm while doing math that hurts. In the hallway, a producer counted down. The green room clock ticked toward the next beat of the show. A young staffer rushed in with a USB drive. "Back up deck," she said to no one and everyone. She turned to leave, then recognized me and stopped. Her eyes flicked to legal, then to the laptop timer. She set the drive on the table like it weighed more than it did. I took a step closer to the laptop, not to touch it, just to read what it planned without shame. The email subject for noon was clear. Partner access, seed to scale playbook. The body text was cheerful. You now have the method that powers million-dollar outcomes. Below it, a link. Below that, my diagram, lines now bold and branded. "Do you understand?" I said, still soft. "That sending this after notice is not clever, it is willful?" He bristled. "We do not accept your interpretation." "It's not interpretation," I said. "It's sequence." Someone knocked. The head of operations entered with a smile trained for donors and cameras. "We're good?" she asked legal, then saw me and smoothed her jacket. "You're early," she said, as if I were a guest. I did not answer. She looked at the letter. "This again?" "Still," I said. She turned to legal. "We're not changing the show. We can manage the paperwork Monday." "Paperwork is the show," I said. She forced a laugh. "We won't be bullied." I tilted my head. "By consent?" She rolled her eyes and slipped back to the corridor. The green room quieted. Legal stared at the table, then at the door, then at the timer. 11:02, I sat on a chair near the wall and took out a small notebook. I wrote the room. Who entered, what was said, where the laptop sat, what the timer showed, how the air smelled like citrus cleaner and nerves. I wrote because details hold up better than feelings when people argue about truth. My phone buzzed. "Nora, do not engage on stage. Stay factual. If they announce, let them. Capture." I typed back, "Green room, auto release at 12 WAD, photographed." She replied, "Good. If they send, forward the email to a neutral party and yourself. Archive headers." Through the wall, the CEO's voice rose with the rhythm I used to coach. He reached the place where a promise hooks a crowd. I could hear applause the way I can hear rain approach. First a rumor, then a pattern. I stood. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. I was ready to watch them choose the mirror. I was ready to let the clock do its slow work on pride. Legal said, almost kindly, "You could make this easy." "This is easy," I said. "Tell the truth." He looked down. The laptop timer blinked. 10:59, then 11:00. The numbers turned with the patience of a tide. The schedule outside tightened. Inside, the file named Final glowed, as if light could turn a boundary into a suggestion. I opened the door to the hall and felt the heat of stage lamps leak into the cool. The head of operations hurried past with a stack of cue cards. On the top card, I saw the word ownership printed in heavy type. She turned the corner. The applause swelled again. The stage manager's whisper chased it. Methodology in 2. I stepped into the corridor and counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. I walked toward the wings where they would show my garden as their field. The timer on the laptop kept moving. In the room behind me, each second a quiet footstep toward noon. I reached the curtain and looked out. The slide deck thumbnail glowed with the shape I drew when winter was hard and belief was cheap. The CEO lifted his hand to cue the change. The operator touched the key that makes a thing public. And in the same breath, a new sound cut through the music of the room. The soft chime from the laptop in the green room as the auto-release window opened a settings pane I had not noticed before. A pane with a single line across the top. Require owner. Consent off. When the chime rang, every hair on my arm stood upright. It was small, barely heard above applause, but unmistakable, like a whisper in a cathedral. I didn't move right away. The operator hit the next slide. The CEO smiled, his teeth white under the stage lights. But I knew that chime wasn't applause. It was a clock striking the beginning of their mistake. From the wings, I could see everything. The lights, the crowd, the bright diagram that used to be my late-night sketch on the back of a grocery list. It glowed like stained glass. I had loved that pattern once, the symmetry, the way each circle fit neatly into another. Now it felt like looking at a house I built that someone else had moved into without paying rent. I took one quiet step backward. My pulse steadied. I didn't want revenge. I wanted record. That's what people forget about quiet women. They think silence means surrender. It doesn't. It means evidence. I slipped out of the wings and back down the hall to the green room. The legal counsel was still there, staring at the laptop like it had turned to stone. "What was that sound?" he asked. "The system confirming your auto-release," I said. "The one you told me wasn't set." He blinked. "That can't be." "It is," I said, and pointed. On the screen, a progress bar crawled across the folder. Sending to 312 recipients. The subject line was already visible. My diagram was attached, branded, circulating faster than thought. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. His face went pale in the way people go pale when they realize the floor under them belongs to someone else. "Forward one of those emails to yourself," I said calmly. "It's already public now. Pretending it didn't happen won't help." He hesitated, then did it. The ping hit my phone seconds later. Proof, timestamp, sender, recipients. I sent it straight to Nora. She replied almost instantly. "That's it. They crossed from mistake into willful. Keep everything." The man in the navy suit looked at me like I'd pulled a thread he hadn't known was holding the whole fabric together. "We'll handle this internally," he said. "You can't handle what's already outside," I answered. He rubbed his forehead, muttered something about damage control, and left. I stayed seated, watching the bar reach 100%. When the final ping came, I closed the laptop lid softly, as if tucking a child in. The applause from the stage roared through the walls again. They were still talking, still claiming, still shining under lights that had begun to flicker with the weight of their words. I checked the email again. 312 recipients. Partners, investors, clients, press. Each message identical. Each carrying the seed-to-scale framework without my consent. Each a line of proof drawn in digital ink. I thought of the early years when we'd stayed late to meet impossible deadlines. When we'd eaten cold pizza and laughed through exhaustion, promising we'd never become one of those companies. I had believed them. I had believed in us. Belief, I realized, is the first luxury you lose when people forget what your name is worth. I didn't go home. I went to the small park across the street, where the fountain murmured like an old friend. I sat on a bench and opened my notebook. My handwriting was small, deliberate. I wrote down each event in order. Tuesday, access changed. Wednesday, first notice sent. Thursday, second notice. Friday, public release after notice. Facts, not feelings. Feelings come and go. Facts stay sharp. I thought about the house I grew up in. My father built it himself, brick by brick, without a crew. He used to say, "Measure 3 times before you call something yours." I had measured, and they hadn't. The CEO's words from the stage echoed faintly through the glass lobby doors. "We own this innovation. It belongs to all of us." No, I thought. It belongs to the one who built it and kept proof. I opened my email again. There it was, the partner message complete with my diagram. I opened the attachment. Each slide carried my structure, my examples, my phrasing. They hadn't even bothered to change the sample case names. And on the final slide, in small gray text, was a line that almost made me laugh. "Developed by Aurelia Labs. I saved it to 3 drives. 1 cloud, 1 USB, 1 paper print. The world forgets paper until it needs it." Then my phone buzzed again. Not Nora this time. It was Mia, the young analyst with more heart than her title. Her message was short. "You should see the internal chat. They're panicking. CEO asked if authorship could be deleted from metadata. Legal says your signature's embedded in the file history. Everyone's gone quiet." I smiled a little. Embedded means forever. I wrote one more line in my notebook. They built their house on borrowed land. A cool breeze lifted my hair. The fountain kept murmuring. The sun shifted just enough to make the water flash gold. I closed my eyes for a second and felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. Small and steady, like the first note of a long song. When I opened my eyes, a man in a press badge was walking toward the doors of the building, phone in hand. He was live streaming. Behind him, the stage lights glowed through the glass, and the CEO's voice came through faintly, shaky now. "We will, of course, handle any administrative questions later." I didn't need to watch the rest. I already knew how this sort of story plays out. Truth takes its time, but it doesn't lose. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and began to walk toward the intersection where taxis waited. I would go home, make tea, and write one last email, to the board, to the partners, to the clients who deserved honesty. Calm, factual, polite, a mirror, not a weapon. But as I reached the crosswalk, my phone buzzed again. It was Mia. Only 3 words this time, no punctuation. "They're calling emergency meeting." I stopped in the middle of the street, heart steady, and looked back at the building that used to be mine. The glass reflected sunlight like water. Inside, the applause had died. Silence had arrived. The kind of silence that means something is breaking open. And that's when my other phone vibrated. My old personal number. The one only a few people still had. I glanced down. The caller ID read a name I hadn't seen in years. A partner from a global firm. The one we had once begged for attention. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Is it true?" he asked, breathless. "You still hold the original rights to Seed to Scale?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "It's more than true," I said. "It's documented." He was silent for a long moment. Then his voice dropped to a whisper that carried more weight than any cheer. "Then I think they just lost everything." I didn't rush to the meeting. When panic runs ahead, truth walks steady. I took the elevator up, watching numbers glow one by one. My phone buzzed nonstop. Emails, missed calls, 2 reporters asking for statements. I didn't answer. I wanted silence to do the talking first. The door to the conference room was cracked. Through it, I heard overlapping voices, defensive, sharp, afraid. The CEO stood at the head of the table, jacket off, sleeves rolled. Around him, faces I once trained looked down at laptops like students caught cheating. I stepped in. Conversations froze. For a moment, only the hum of the projector filled the room. My reflection appeared faintly on the screen. My own face projected beside the slide they'd stolen. "You're not supposed to be here," the head of operations said. "I built this room," I replied. The CEO straightened. "We're having a private discussion." "So am I said, placing my folder on the table. The kind that doesn't need microphones. I sat, opened the folder, and spread out the documents like cards. Each page stamped, dated, signed. Their eyes moved over the signatures, then up to me. "Let's not waste time," I said. "You used the Seed to Scale framework in public after receiving notice. You distributed it to over 300 recipients. You acknowledged receipt of my warning. All of this is recorded. The CEO rubbed his temple. We acted on advice from counsel. Our position is that the framework was created during your employment. I nodded once. Yes. And that employment came with the clause of good standing. You changed my access. You changed my role. You never issued written correction. That activated the clause. You used it anyway. Silence spread like ink. He glanced at legal, who shuffled papers but said nothing. I leaned back in my chair. You know, I didn't plan to fight. I planned to retire quietly. But the moment you erased my name, you made my silence impossible. The head of operations scoffed. This is about money, isn't it? No, I said. It's about truth. She opened her mouth again, but the CEO raised a hand. Let her speak. I watched him carefully. His face was calm, but his hands trembled near the glass of water. What do you want? He asked finally. I want recognition of authorship, immediate suspension of all public use until consent is formalized, and a correction sent to everyone who received that packet. That's the minimum. What happens next depends on your integrity. He laughed softly, a sound meant to disguise fear. You think we'll just hand over $1 million concept because of an old paper? I met his eyes. You already did. Every download you sent carries my digital signature in the metadata. You can't erase that. Every partner who opened the file now has proof that you used a method without authorization. The more you fight, the clearer it gets. Someone at the far end of the table whispered, She's right. He turned sharply. Excuse me? The voice belonged to Mia. I hadn't noticed her at first, tucked among senior managers. She met my gaze, her face pale but steady. The metadata confirms her authorship, she said. I checked it myself. It's embedded in the framework template. If we try to alter it now, it'll show tampering. A heavy quiet followed. The CEO looked from her to me, then to the screen where my diagram still glowed like a ghost that refused to leave. Turn that off, he said. No one moved. He slammed a hand on the table. Turn it off. Finally, someone clicked the remote. The screen went black. For a heartbeat, the room was lit only by the blue light from laptops and the reflection of faces that had lost certainty. I gathered my papers. You can shout at the screen if you like, I said. But the story's already out. The world has the email, the timestamp, the proof. He stepped closer, voice low. You could destroy us. I stood too. You did that yourselves. I'm just holding the mirror. He took a deep breath, his bravado cracking. What do you want me to do right now? I looked at the clock, 11:47. Stop the noon release. Pull the partner packet. Announce a review of ownership. Say you're cooperating with the original author. It's your only clean exit, he hesitated. If I make that statement, we admit fault. If you don't, I said, you admit fraud. The word hung heavy between us. He walked to the window, staring down at the street where cameras waited. You think people care about who wrote a method? They care about results. Maybe, I said. But when results come from stolen work, they don't last. Every empire built on borrowed land eventually sinks. He turned back, eyes dark. You think this makes you a hero? No, I said. It makes me honest. He sank into his chair. The others whispered. Some looked relieved, others afraid. Truth has that effect. It rearranges people. My phone buzzed again. Nora's message, press asking for comment. Don't speak yet. Let them sweat. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I'll give you 1 hour, I told them. Either you correct this, or I take it public with proof attached. The CEO's jaw tightened. You wouldn't. I would, I said. Because you taught me something important. Access isn't power. Ownership is. I walked to the door, folder under my arm. Before stepping out, I turned and said quietly, You've got until noon. The room stayed frozen as I left, the weight of time pressing against the windows. In the hallway, my steps echoed. My reflection moved along the glass walls like a shadow finally catching up with itself. Outside, the press crowd grew thicker, cameras aimed at the lobby doors. The story was already breathing. At the elevator, I paused and looked down at my watch. 11:52, 8 minutes left. Would they do the right thing or double down on the lie? The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, the quiet humming in my chest louder than applause had ever been. If you've ever watched someone erase your work, tell me in the comments how you took your power back. The elevator hummed as it carried me down. 8 minutes isn't much, but it can split a story. In the lobby, tripods and boom mics waited like weather. I sat by a worn ficus under a sign that chirped, "Welcome partners." Folder on my lap. 11:54 at 11:56, the head of operations appeared with the CEO. Their smiles had cracks. "Let's talk," she said. "We have 6 minutes," I said. "We'll issue a statement," the CEO offered. "A joint statement." "Read it," she read from a tablet. "Effective immediately, we are conducting an internal review of authorship regarding the seed-to-scale framework. During this review, we will pause distribution. We appreciate the contributions of all team members." "My name," I said. "We can't include names," she replied. "You already did," I said. "Correct as publicly as you claimed," he lowered his voice. "We need a path that doesn't admit liability." "You need one that admits truth. Say authorship with the original author. Pause the playbook. Email the same list with correction. Then call me." A comms director showed a draft. "We're pausing while we clarify internal credits." "Imprecise is dishonest," I said. "Say authorship." "Say consent," a reporter edged closer. "Are you claiming ownership?" "I'm not claiming," I said. "I'm holding documents." 11:58. "Fine," the CEO told comms. "Change it to, we are pausing distribution of the seed-to-scale framework while we finalize authorship with its original author. Push now." Screens lit around the lobby. 12 Mo auditorium doors opened. Guests spilled out. The CEO leaned close. "Come upstairs. We'll finalize language and give you the credit line you want." "I want the credit the framework deserves," I said, "and the control the paper grants." Legal arrived from a side elevator, tie askew, printout in hand. "We need a room." We rode up to the 13th floor. A glass room faced the river. On the screen, "Authorship and consent agreement, seed to scale," I read. It recognized my authorship, restored my status in good standing, retroactive to the day they dimmed me, required my consent for future public use, and set clean terms. Signature lines waited. "What's missing is the correction email," I said. "We'll send it," legal replied. Same recipients. "It will state you authored the framework and future use occurs under your consent. We'll co-sign a public note today." The head of operations rolled her eyes. "She wants the headline." "I want the history clean," I said. The CEO rubbed his jaw. "If we sign, will you pursue damages?" "If you sign now and send the correction in 10 minutes, I'll consider it corrected." "But I won't sign a silence," he nodded. We signed. Legal, the CEO, me, then her. Each stroke a small surrender. Comms poked in. "Corrected email sent. Auto-release flushed. Link disabled." "Good," I said. One clause required public acknowledgement of the oversight. "This must go out today." "It will," legal said. Stage remarks, then the note. "I won't go on stage," I said. "You made this on stage. You can fix it on stage. My name is in the document. That's where names live." Mia slipped in with a laptop. "The metadata thread is circulating," she said. "People see the signature." "Let them," I said. The CEO exhaled. "We'll brief team leads in 30 minutes. Mia, help comms with FAQs." Before we signed, I asked for one more line, a plain sentence any partner could understand. Legal typed while I dictated, "Seed to Scale was authored by my name. The company uses it with her consent under the terms attached." No adjectives. The best kind of sentence is a straight road. A guard cracked the door. "Press wants an on-record comment." I shook my head. "Not yet." The CEO nodded, grateful to let the statement breathe before air turned to fire. Legal summarized the consent terms. No public demos, decks, or downloads without my prior written approval. Narrow carve-out for internal training. Attribution on the title slide and in metadata. Quarterly review to ensure compliance. Immediate suspension if access is changed again without written notice. Mia typed as he spoke, catching each nail in the bridge we built over our history. The corrected email dinged. I opened it. The subject echoed the first, now with its honest twin. Inside, the first line named me. The second paused distribution. The third linked an agreement summary. I forwarded it to Nora with 2 words. It's clean. Down in the lobby, a reporter lifted his camera toward the glass. He caught my silhouette against the river. Let him. A silhouette is safer than a soundbite when paper is doing the speaking. The head of operations slipped her tablet into a bag. You win, she said, almost kind. For now. This isn't a game, I said. It's the record. The room exhaled together. Legal's phone vibrated. He frowned. We may have another matter. The CEO stiffened. What now? A third party has requested an urgent meeting. With her alone, Legal said, looking at me. They claim prior rights tied to your earliest draft. The room cooled. Which third party? I asked. A global firm, he said. Not our partner. They say they funded your pilot years ago under a letter you may have forgotten. Memory stirred. One winter, one small grant. A promised credit line I never cashed because the project outgrew the paper. Cheap lights, cold coffee, a dusty room, names on a letter I filed and moved past. Is it a real claim or leverage? The CEO asked. Legal didn't answer. He turned his phone so I could see a subject line. Request to review original letter of intent. Seed to scale. Fresh ink shone on our signatures. Cameras waited below for an ending that had just become a beginning. The river kept moving, old and patient. I stood very still and listened to the quiet tick of the wall clock. Legal leaned in, voice barely above the glassy hush. We need to talk, now. The conference room emptied until only Legal and I remained. The river outside ran slow and brown, the way rivers do when too much has been poured into them. He closed the door softly and set a thin folder on the table. This is from that global firm, he said. They claim your original pilot used their research grant. I nodded. A small grant. $3,000 15 years ago. It helped us buy whiteboards. They say the letter of intent included a future option. If your framework reached market, they'd have right of first license. I remembered the meeting clearly. A polite man with an overdone tie, a form that used words like may and consider. I'd signed it because back then, no one cared about what seed to scale meant. I opened the folder. There it was, the old logo, the same vague language. But on the last page, a line I'd forgotten glowed under the scan. This letter shall expire upon lapse of project activity for more than 2 years without written renewal. I smiled. It lapsed 13 years ago. He sighed with relief. Then they have no claim. Maybe not legal, I said. But leverage doesn't need proof, just panic. He hesitated. They requested to meet today. Where? Their downtown office. 1 o'clock. I checked my watch. It was 12:40. Then let's not keep them waiting. The taxi smelled of old rain and newspaper ink. The city blurred past. My phone pinged, Mia again. Press statement live. Most comments positive. Some calling you the quiet storm. I almost laughed. I hadn't felt like a storm. I'd felt like weather. Something that just exists, sometimes inconvenient, but necessary. When we arrived, a receptionist led me to a glass-walled boardroom. Inside, 2 men and 1 woman waited, their badges clipped with the same old logo from the letter. The woman stood to shake my hand. Thank you for coming, Miss, she began, then caught herself. For coming, I took a seat. I hear you have questions about an old grant, she smiled thinly. Not questions, opportunities. Your framework is valuable. We funded the earliest research. We'd like to formalize our connection and propose an acquisition of all rights before this gets messy. The older man leaned forward. We're offering 7 figures. Clean transfer. You can consult, of course. Legacy credit, legacy credit. The polite word for erasure. I folded my hands. You're offering to buy something you don't own from someone who doesn't sell. He chuckled. Everything has a price. Then you'll need more zeros, I said. And the currency isn't money. The woman frowned. You'd rather spend years in litigation? No, I said. I'd rather spend 1 hour reading your own clause. I slid the copy of the letter across the table, highlighting the expiry line. 2 years of inactivity. You had 13. Her face stiffened. That language is ambiguous. Not in time, I said. Time isn't ambiguous. The older man tried another angle. Then perhaps a partnership. We lend credibility, resources, protection. You bring authorship. We present this together. It was a smarter play. My pulse slowed to its steady rhythm. What would my name mean in that version? I asked. He smiled. Symbolic authorship. You'd remain a figurehead. We'd manage operations. Symbolic. Another polite word for invisible. I stood. When I wrote the framework, I didn't design it for symbols. I built it for work that feeds families, saves time, and respects the people who build. That's not symbolic. The woman tapped her pen, trying not to lose composure. You're making this emotional. Of course I am, I said. It's my life's work. You can't detach heart from authorship. If you could, no one would care about stories. The room fell quiet. Through the glass, I saw interns carrying coffee and laughter down the hall. The ordinary rhythm of people who didn't know history was being written one room away. The older man softened his tone. Look, you've proven your point. The company has corrected attribution. You've earned admiration. But fame fades. We can offer permanence. Archives, global rollout, your name etched in plaques. Plaques. I thought of polished metal, nailed to walls of buildings that eventually get sold. Permanence isn't something you buy, I said. It's something you keep when everyone else forgets. The woman closed her notebook. So your answer is no? My answer is no. They exchanged glances. The man stood. You're refusing $1 million offer? I'm refusing $1 million misunderstanding, he sighed. You'll regret this. Possibly, I said. But regret is lighter than surrender. I gathered my folder, thanked them, and walked out. Outside, the city was louder, brighter. The sky had that pale gray shine before rain. My phone buzzed again, Nora this time. They tried to buy you out, didn't they? Yes. You refused? Of course. Good, call me tonight. A neutral party just reached out. Someone big. They want a private meeting. Who? She replied with a name that made me stop in the middle of the sidewalk. It wasn't a corporation. It was a government research agency. The same one that had turned our method into a national pilot years ago, before bureaucracy buried it. They said they want to talk directly with you, Nora added. Not the company, you. I stared at the message, the noise of traffic fading behind it. The rain started to fall, soft, deliberate, cleansing. I walked toward it without an umbrella. $1 million concept had almost been bought for a story it wasn't, stolen twice, buried once, and still somehow alive. I had turned down 2 offers today, one from thieves, one from ghosts. But this next meeting wasn't about money. It sounded like consequence, the kind that could rewrite everything again, only this time in daylight. I stopped at a corner cafe, ordered black tea, and sat by the window. My reflection looked back, older, steadier, still here. Across the street, on a digital billboard, the company's statement scrolled. We are proud to collaborate with the original author of the Seed to Scale framework to ensure continued innovation with integrity. Integrity. A word that had been missing for months. Now it was on a 30-foot screen. The waiter placed the tea before me. Rough day? He asked. I smiled. Necessary day. My phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. Just 3 words that tightened my grip on the cup. Tomorrow. I am confidential. Morning arrived with a sky the color of paper, blank, waiting. I dressed simply. No makeup, no perfume, only a pen tucked into my notebook. The message had said confidential 9 a.m. and nothing more. The address led to a quiet government complex near the river. Gray stone and tall glass that reflected the city like a half-remembered dream. At the entrance, a guard checked my ID. Meeting with Director Hale, he said into his radio, then waved me through. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and old decisions. A woman met me at the elevator. Ms. she began, then caught herself. They're ready for you. The room was small, no stage lights, no banners. 3 people sat at the table. Director Hale, his deputy, and a technical advisor who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. They greeted me politely, almost warmly, and offered tea. Hale began. We've been following your situation with interest. Your framework underpins several public sector initiatives. We need clarity on authorship and usage rights. There's risk exposure if the foundation isn't clean. I nodded. The authorship is clear. The company now recognizes it. Consent is formalized. He studied me for a moment. We reviewed your original documents. You filed early prototypes with our innovation grant 15 years ago. We never closed that project, only archived it. Technically, the government retains certain rights to review and oversight. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of my earliest drafts, scanned, annotated, stamped. My handwriting looked naive and hopeful, the kind of writing that believed paper was protection enough. I remember these, I said. I thought they'd been discarded. They weren't, he replied. We're not claiming ownership, but the framework now influences critical programs. We need it governed correctly. We'd like you to lead that governance. For a moment, I didn't breathe. You're asking me to oversee the use of seed to scale? He nodded. Independent oversight. You'd work with the department directly. Ensure integrity across agencies and contractors. It's part ethics, part implementation. We'll fund the role separately. You report to no company, just the method itself. I sat back, letting the words settle. After months of being silenced, erased, bargained over, I was being asked to guard the thing I'd built. What about the company? I asked. They'll adapt, Hale said. Their license stands, but under your review. Think of it as balance restored. The technical advisor leaned forward. Your framework's reach is wider than you may realize. We've tracked adoption in multiple sectors. People call it different names, but the bones are yours. If you accept this role, you'll have authority to set standards. Quiet power if you want it, quiet power. The phrase settled on my skin like sunlight. I thought of the young staffers who'd stayed late, of Mia checking metadata, of Nora keeping receipts, of my father's rule. Measure 3 times before you call something yours. I'll accept, I said. On one condition, Hale raised an eyebrow. Which is that the acknowledgement is public. Quiet power only works if the truth isn't hidden. He smiled. Fair. We'll issue a release after our review concludes. You'll draft your part. We spent 2 hours refining language, defining responsibilities, drafting a timeline. Every clause felt like a small repair to a long tear. The advisor showed data projections, efficiency gains, cost savings, lives improved because of a pattern I'd once drawn on a napkin. Numbers with human breath behind them. When the meeting ended, Hale shook my hand. You built something enduring. It deserves stewardship, not ownership wars. Outside, the air was colder. Reporters waited across the street. Not for me this time, but for someone else leaving a different door. I slipped past unnoticed, which was exactly how I wanted it. I walked along the river, notebook in hand. The water mirrored the sky, gray and patient. My reflection wavered on its surface, a blur that looked both young and ancient. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was defending myself. I felt like I was defining something larger. My phone buzzed. It was the CEO. We saw the news. Government oversight? Me, governance. It protects everyone. CEO, does it limit us? Me, only limits dishonesty. So you've boxed us in. Me. No, I've given you walls sturdy enough to hold weight. He didn't reply. A few minutes later, Mia texted. They're rewriting internal policy. You should see the new clause. Authorship may not be altered, hidden, or reassigned. You changed the rulebook. I stopped at a bench overlooking the water. The wind lifted the edge of my notebook. I wrote slowly, the ink trembling with each gust. Integrity is not a destination. It's maintenance. A pigeon landed near my feet, unbothered by the world's noise. Somewhere behind me, church bells marked noon again. Exactly 1 day since the stage lights had burned my name off the screen. Now, it was carved into law. I closed the notebook and sat still, feeling the quiet strength of closure. But closure that breathes, not ends. The kind that makes room for beginnings that don't hurt. My phone buzzed once more. A message from Nora. I told you. Slow and exact wins. I smiled. She was right. Silence hadn't been surrender. It had been a scalpel. Across the river, I could see the company's office, a tall reflection of glass and apology. Inside, they were rewriting presentations, replacing we with with. Small words, but weighty ones. I stood, brushed dust from my coat, and walked away from the river. My steps felt lighter. The story that began with a cut had turned into something else. An outline, a framework, a mirror they could never avoid again. And yet deep down, I sensed it wasn't quite over. Stories rarely end where you think they do. As I turned the corner toward home, my phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. A calm voice on the other end said, "We've reviewed your framework globally. There's an international consortium interested in licensing it, with you as governing author. Can we talk tomorrow?" I stopped, watching the clouds move like slow sails over the skyline. "Tomorrow," I said. "But understand, I don't sell mirrors. I lend them." The next morning arrived soft and colorless, the kind of dawn that feels like an erased chalkboard. I brewed tea, the same way I had every morning for 20 years. But today the steam didn't smell of dread. It smelled like a start. The International Consortium meeting was set for 10. They'd sent an agenda, short, polite, professional. I read it twice. Review, governance, licensing ethics. No mention of ownership battles or credit disputes, just work. That alone felt like a small miracle. By 9, I was in a quiet office tower overlooking the harbor. The room they'd booked had windows on 3 sides and light that moved gently across the table. There were 5 people waiting, 3 on video, 2 in person. Their accents scattered across continents. "Thank you for joining, Ms." The chair began, then smiled. "Thank you for joining. We're here to finalize our recognition and ensure a framework for global use." He gestured to a screen that showed a map dotted with pins: South Africa, Australia, Germany, the UK, and more. Seed to Scale has been adopted under many different project names. We want unified governance, consistent ethics, and clear authorship. The words landed like soft rain. They weren't trying to buy me out, just to build right. The woman from Germany spoke first. "Our engineers found your signature embedded in every version, even translations. It's like the method itself refuses to be separated from you." I smiled faintly. It was designed to hold truth at every step. The Australian representative leaned forward. "We'd like to draft a charter that credits you as principal author and establishes the framework as open use with attribution. Any organization using it would sign a pledge of ethical implementation. Are you comfortable with that?" I took a slow breath. "Yes, but with one condition: authorship acknowledgement cannot be optional. If it's used, the origin must stay visible, not for ego, but for integrity. When people know who built something, they respect it more." He nodded. "Agreed. Transparency builds trust." We spent 2 hours refining language, defining limits, tracing how ideas travel between people and still keep their shape. There were no raised voices, no ego wars, just clarity. It felt like the method itself was breathing easier through our words. When the draft charter was finished, the chair said, "You've created more than a process. You've created an ethic. We'd like you to co-sign the charter at the summit next month." "Publicly?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "On record. We believe it's important that creators stand beside their work, not behind it." I nodded. "Then I'll stand beside it." He smiled. "Congratulations. You've turned correction into legacy." After the meeting, I walked to the harbor rail. The water below was restless, but sure of its direction. Seagulls cried overhead, messy, alive, unbothered. I leaned against the cold metal and let the wind pull the last of the tension from my shoulders. I thought about the company, the boardroom silence, the broken arrogance, the rewritten slides. I didn't feel triumph, not really. What I felt was proportion. Things had returned to the size they should have always been. My phone buzzed. A message from the CEO. "We saw the consortium release. We'll comply with new charter terms. Thank you for your work." I stared at the screen for a moment. The man who once laughed at paper now thanked it. Correction, not revenge. Then another message. Mia again. "We're hosting internal ethics sessions now. Your clause started a movement." That made me smile. Small ripples reaching outward. I opened my notebook and wrote one line. "Revenge ends stories. Correction continues them." In the afternoon, I met Nora for tea. She hugged me longer than usual. "You look lighter," she said. "I stopped fighting ghosts," I replied. She laughed. "And started building mirrors." We talked for hours about resilience, paperwork, small mercies. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever think about walking away from all of it?" "Sometimes," I said. But walking away doesn't mean disappearing. It means walking toward something else, she nodded. So what's next? Maybe teaching, I said. Not how to build systems, but how to protect what you build. Nora raised her cup. To protection. To patience, I said, clinking mine against hers. That evening I sat on my balcony watching lights shimmer across the water. The city hummed below, cars, laughter, lives overlapping. Somewhere people were using my framework, maybe not knowing my story, maybe never hearing my name. And that was fine, because the truth was there, embedded in the lines, patient as ink. I opened my laptop one last time and read the draft of the charter. My name sat in the top corner, simple and unadorned. Beneath it, hundreds of organizations would someday sign. My cursor hovered over one section, Principle 1, Authorship as Accountability. That was it, the core of everything. Not credit for vanity, but credit for responsibility. You own what you create, because you stand behind its consequences. I pressed save. Outside, the air turned cool, and the moon rose like a coin flipped by fate, finally landing on its edge. My phone vibrated once more. A message from Hale, short and warm. Congratulations. The world runs better when builders lead, I replied with just one line. And when honesty has a seat at the table, then I closed the laptop and exhaled. The story that began with a firing and a stolen method had become something else entirely. A lesson written, in calm ink. You don't have to break others to fix what's yours. Correction, not revenge. That was the victory. And just as I thought it was truly over, a soft chime sounded from my inbox. A new message, subject line glowing against the night. Invitation, Global Ethics Summit, opening speaker, the original author of Seed to Scale. I smiled into the dark, feeling peace hum like quiet applause. The plane touched down just after dawn. Clouds peeled away from the horizon like pages turning. Below, the city hosting the Global Ethics Summit shimmered with light. Glass towers, tidy parks, a ribbon of river winding through it all. The same water, I thought, different banks. They met me at the gate with a placard bearing my name. For years I'd watched people misplace it, shrink it, or erase it. Now it stood upright, spelled correctly, held by a stranger who smiled. Welcome, ma'am. We're honored you're here. At the hotel, a folder waited on the desk. Inside was the final draft of the Charter for Ethical Authorship and Implementation. My signature line sat next to the consortium's seal. I read every clause slowly. Each one a brick laid over months of bruises. Transparent attribution, fair use, mandatory consent, periodic review. No corporate spin, just clean language that respected work and the people behind it. When I signed, the pen scratched softly across the page. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways, angry, triumphant, tearful, but what I felt was simple, balance. It was the sound of a scale finding center. Later that afternoon, the hall filled with faces from everywhere, gray hair and bright eyes, suits and sneakers, accents layered like music. Some knew my story. Most only knew the framework. Cameras flashed. The moderator's voice echoed, "Please welcome the author of the Seed to Scale framework." Applause rose, warm and full. I walked onto the stage, the same kind of light that once erased me now resting gently instead of burning. I looked out at the crowd and began. There was a time when I thought silence kept peace. It doesn't. Silence keeps secrets, and secrets rot good work from the inside. I learned that authorship isn't about ego. It's about accountability. You own what you build so you can stand behind it when it matters most. The hall quieted, the kind of quiet that listens. Seed to Scale was born from mistakes, late nights, and the belief that ideas should outlive their makers. But they only survive clean when truth stays attached. Every process, every plan, every invention starts with someone daring to put their name on it. Not for applause, but for honesty. I paused. A few heads nodded. Someone in the front row wiped their eyes. Today, this charter isn't just mine. It's ours. It tells every builder, writer, scientist, teacher, and dreamer that what you make matters, and that no one can take your reflection away. Because reflection, I smiled slightly, is how progress recognizes itself. When I finished, the applause came again, not loud like fireworks, but deep like heartbeat. The moderator shook my hand. Cameras clicked. Somewhere, in a far-off office, the CEO probably watched this stream. I hoped he understood. This was never about victory. It was about repair. That evening, the consortium hosted a small dinner by the water. People shared stories of lost credit, quiet wins, rediscovered names. I listened more than I spoke. A woman from Cape Town told me, "Your story reminded me to dust off an old patent application." A man from Dublin said, "You made paperwork sound brave." When it was my turn, I raised my glass. "To truth that doesn't shout," I said. "To the kind that simply stands." We drank, and laughter softened the room. Outside, lanterns floated on the river like patient stars. I slipped away early, shoes in hand, walking along the stone path that followed the water. The night smelled of jasmine and rain. My phone buzzed. "Mia again. Mia, they showed your speech in the office cafeteria." "Me, how'd it go?" "Mia, quiet." Then everyone clapped. Even him. I smiled at the screen, then turned it face down. The world didn't need to watch this part. This part was mine. I sat on a bench overlooking the slow current. The ink on my signature had barely dried, yet it already felt ancient, like something that had been waiting years to settle. The water below caught the moonlight and held it gently, unbroken. I opened my notebook for the last time and wrote, "When they cut me off, I thought I'd lost everything." But sometimes losing access isn't loss, it's clarity. They took my chair, not my voice. They silenced my title, not my truth. And truth, once written, doesn't vanish. It waits for its name to be called again. I closed the book, tucked it under my arm, and let the night breeze move through my hair. A young reporter walked by, recognized me, and asked softly, "Do you have a message for creators watching your journey?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Yes. Don't fight for revenge. Fight for record, because record keeps your dignity alive long after applause fades." He thanked me, and I watched him disappear into the crowd. Across the river, lights blinked from the conference center where the charter hung framed in its new place. Tomorrow it would go into the archives. Next month, universities would teach it. Next year, someone else would sign their own name under its protection. That was the point. I took one last look at the city, at the path that had wound from betrayal to balance, from silence to signature. Then I whispered, not to the world but to myself, "You didn't win. You just came home." The wind carried the words away. The water held the reflection steady. And somewhere inside, peace finally found its permanent address. Share this with someone who forgot their name belongs on their work,